Hello there, it's Richard Blundell here from Accelerance with the third episode in our series of Game Changers, where we dive into the comparison of hyper performance between top sports people and game changers from within the SaaS and venture capital world. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Itxaso del Palacio. We've already said it's going to be a hard name to pronounce. It's difficult for us Brits. But for those people that don't know Itxaso, she's an engineer, an entrepreneur, a founder, an investor, and now a partner at Notion Capital. Good morning, Itxaso.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm really, really good. Thank you so much for doing this. This series has already been incredibly enlightening. We've interviewed an Olympic athlete. We've interviewed various people from the world of SaaS and technology. And perhaps what makes this series a bit different from the normal interviews is I'm trying to dive into discover what the kind of DNA is of hyper performance. And I think when people hear your story, they'll understand what hyper performance is. I'm trying to find the center part of that Venn diagram, if you like, that you share with high performing sports people. And I know later in this podcast, we'll be talking a lot about your sport, which is just incredibly impressive. But I wonder whether we could kick off with you taking me right back to the beginning and tell me a bit about your mum and dad, your family, and your early years.
Yeah, for sure. I can tell you a little bit about that. So thank you for inviting me. And in fact, I listened to the video, Anna's video, the Olympic medal. I'm honored to be here. Honestly, she's a rock star, totally. But yeah, going to the question, I grew up. I guess everybody noticed already my accent. I'm from Spain. I can't hide that one. I grew up in the north of Spain, in a town in the region of San Sebastian. If you guys had been around and having amazing food and a great. I think also a kind of culture and so on. And as you know, Basque Country has a pretty independent mindset. And so I think I grew up in a pretty liberal, independent mindset type of environment where doing things that are not the norm are welcomed. And my parents, specifically my dad, has really ingrained that into the way I behave today. Right? He's an engineer, but he has been also retired for politics, and he has been also he has written 2 books. He's doing very well with the books too. Now he's 72 and he's doing his first documentary, as you do, right? I'm like, what do you do about production? And he said, I don't know, I'm learning, hiring this person. So he's managing all of that, right? So it's this place where, hey, if you want to do it, I guess you can do it, right? So a little bit on that mindset, I guess.
Absolutely. And the Basque story, is well known and ongoing. The continual sort of potential fight for sort of independence sort of carries on. I'm really intrigued for you to tell me the story of your grandfather, if that's okay, because I know that he has an incredible story, and I think his story might tell us something about you.
Yeah, so I think for those who are not that familiar with Spanish history, so we had a dictatorship until 1977, 76, 78. We basically were under dictatorship. I'm talking about 40 years ago. I mean, many of us who are listening to this podcast were just at that time alive or basically small babies, right? But you can believe that our parents lived pretty much a nightmare during their childhood and their lives, right? It was not like butterflies like these days. And so my grandfather was basically called to go to fight in favor of this dictator. His name is Franco. You probably heard of. And so they were knocking doors in the town, door to door. And so they were asking men to go and fight for Franco, because at the time, Franco was trying to get in the government, trying to push the government, which at the time was what they were called the Republicans, which is not related to the U.S. Republicans, but it's basically a little bit more of a socialist party was in Spain, and they basically were trying to knock them within Madrid. And so Franco took over around Madrid, and they were trying to fight against those. And so they went to the town where my grandfather was, and they asked all the men to join Franco's side and to fight against the Republicans, right? And so my grandfather accepted it because there were two options: either you accept it or they kill your family. Yeah. So they were literally forced to do that. So he left, and after I think it was like 8 months or so, one night he escaped. He crossed through the boundary of Madrid and got into the Republican side. And so somebody recognized him from the town that he was from, and that's why they didn't kill him, because when they saw him, they were like, oh, here is a guy from the other side, right? Let's kill him. Somebody said, hold on a second, I think I know this man. But the reality is that Republican lost that war, and because of that, Franco's people basically took over, and my grandfather was found obviously guilty, and 2 times guilty because of moving to the other side. And so they put him in jail, and he was working on very, very tough works and construction stuff. And if you think of it, all the train lanes were done at the time. So you can imagine people working 24/7 on those. And he was there for 12 years until he was very, very sick. And so they let him go at the end because he was so sick.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he was going to die. And he went out, he still recovered, lived for a couple of years, and they were living in a town. My family, my grandparents' families were not in Basque Country. The only place in Spain where you could work after being in jail and being basically against Franco, as my grandpa had been, was in Basque Country. Otherwise, you had that stamp that you were basically, as is said in Latin, persona non grata, right? Like, they will not take you in. And so my grandfather's family migrated to Basque Country, and that's where my dad was born, who was the second child, in fact. So they are 12 years between my uncle and my dad, because my grandfather was in jail during all that time.
How extraordinary. And having lived through that as a family from your father's point of view, what effect do you think that had on him and therefore potentially on you?
Definitely a big impact. So my dad has always encouraged me to think, why are we doing those things? Why do we need to do this? Why everyone is doing that? Why are we doing it in this other way, right? And that comes a lot because when you are in a dictatorship, the government dictates what you do.
Yeah.
And you got to do it, right? This is what you do in the morning. This is what you do. This is what you do on Sunday in Spain, which was a very religious country. You go to church. Yeah. And you got to go to church. You get a stamp as you go to church. And if you don't have the stamp, then you don't get the job. Yeah. And if you haven't been working for 5 days, then you don't have a healthcare. And you know what I mean? Everything gets together. And so my father always encouraged me to question the state of the art.
Yes.
Why are we doing those things, right? Yeah. And so always trying to also look for how can we help people that we have around. There are always people who have a little bit less than we do, because we are ultimately very privileged, right? And so to think a little bit how other people are impacted for those things that we do in a day-to-day basis. So definitely it has impacted.
So right from the get-go, a sense of curiosity, a sense of rebellion, a sense of pay it forward, the kind of karma. I spoke to Gary in the last episode, Gary Stewart, about, pay it forward and the sense of karma that comes with doing that. But right from the get-go, it sounds to me there was if someone gave you a piece of paper and said, don't turn this over, you would have turned it over and said, why not? A sense of adventure. Yeah.
For sure. And I'm feeling that I wasn't, in fact, doing any mischief. That's a way to do it.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And I know right from the start that the dance played an important part in your life. And there's an exercise gene born, isn't there, very early on in where you're at, and we'll pick up on more of that later and how that manifests itself. But talk to me about classical ballet and the role that played in your life.
Yeah, sure. So when I was, I think, like 4 or 5 years old, my sister, who's a little bit older than me, she was studying music after school and playing some instruments. And so we were going to this place, the conservatory, where they were teaching dance and music. And my mom always says that since I was like very, very young, I was obsessed with this little girls running around. I was always like very tiny, getting into the room, checking in, right? When we were going to basically drop off and pick up my sister from those schools, right? From the lectures. And so I really wanted to get in. And as soon as they could sign me up, basically they signed me up. I started dancing ballet when I was 6 years old. And I was dancing until I went to university, in fact, because it's something that you do every day. And then at a certain point, you got to make a choice if you want to continue that career or you basically take a career which is going to university and studying and so on. Even secondary school was a little bit tough because they were encouraging us to basically study during the night and go in the morning, which my parents weren't very comfortable about. Most of it, I was pretty good, but I was not top of the top. And so they could see totally that you can be really good. You can be dancing in a good ballet around the world, but you are not, there is one person in the middle, one.
Yeah.
So that you need to be that really 1% or even 0 point something percent, because behind there are 35 people like their little things and dancing around. And so you need to understand where you are against that, right? And if something happens to you physically, basically your career is over since you are 18, 20 years old. So I definitely, but I absolutely loved it. It is a very discipline. It's a very strong discipline that has definitely shaped the way I think. I'm very independent in the way I work. When you are dancing, you are by yourself. You fight until the end to be that dancer in the middle, right? Because we are training something. And guess what? Teachers don't tell you you are going to dance. You are going to be the first dancer. They train 3 or 4 of them. And so you are training until the last day. So you are 12 years old. You are training every single day. There are 5 people training for that. And the last 2 days, they say, oh, you are going to be the one dancing. And so the rest, obviously, it's a huge disappointment. And you've been, all these people in this class are competing with me. Right? I'm not working with them. I am competing with, and since you are very young, you become very, very competitive. Those girls are not my friends.
Yeah. So I guess there's a extremely hard work physically, hard work mentally. It must have taken a hell of a discipline to rise to that level. And added to that kind of independence, that fire, that competitiveness. Was it a surprise to you and to others and to family when you went into engineering first, when you sort of followed what your father had done? Did anyone raise their eyebrow and think, wow, I'm surprised she's kind of followed that direction?
In fact, he was the first one surprised. Because he is the one who has always been telling me, just because people study engineering or they study, you should question it too. So he wasn't very keen on me going to engineering either. He was like, just what do you want to do? You don't need to follow me. So he was thinking, you are following me? You shouldn't do it. You just need to choose what you want, right? So just to give you a little understanding, in Spain, our Spanish is a very Catholic country. So when I was born, everyone was baptized. I'm saying everyone. So my dad was the one pushing, she's not going to be baptized because maybe she doesn't want to be Catholic.
Wow.
Maybe she wants to choose another religion. So
Wow.
let's give her the chance to. So all those things are very, very interesting. In my school, there were only 2 kids not baptized, my sister and me.
Did that make you feel like an outsider at all? I mean, was
For
that
sure, for sure. I mean, they were those specifically when you are a child, right? They are religion classes, and so my parents asked the teachers, she is not going to attend the classes unless you are going to teach different religions.
Yeah.
Which was not going to be the case, as you can imagine, right?
Absolutely.
And then absolutely. So people do their first communion, they get presents. So they gave me presents, my parents. You will get presents too. Right?
Yeah.
And so things like that, because you are like, hey, all my friends are getting all these presents, such a big party, and those dresses, you know? I'm not doing anything.
Yeah. It's a little known fact, actually. I haven't really talked about it much, but I went to school in Malaga for about 3 months in the early 1980s. And it was a culture I immediately fell in love with. And I remember sitting around dinner tables, you know, family, we stayed with a family. It was a school exchange, you know, and we actually had to come back, weirdly enough, because the Falklands War broke out. Why they thought that Spain and Argentina would I don't know why, but anyway, we suddenly got this bus and we were shipped out. But what I remember is sitting around that family table and the debate and the discussion and the passion. And I couldn't understand more than a few words each time, but I remember being transfixed by the energy that goes into families. Was your family like that as well?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, it is, we've been always very open. So I believe different families, you cannot generalize for sure, right? I think different families are different. In my case, as we've been always very open, questioning things. As I said, my dad was in politics, so he has been always writing in newspapers or so on, right? And so we talk about everything. I mean, like literally every politics it's a big topic for us. Always things that are happening in the world. He sends to me things that are happening in London, and I have no idea they are happening. You know what I mean? He's like, "Hey, have you read about this?" I'm like, "I have no idea this is happening in London."
The whole world out there to discover.
Exactly.
So you ended up working at Daimler, I think you pronounce it in Spanish, as an engineer, and quickly realized that wasn't your passion. And I think, you know, with the dance, the classical dance, you'd found something immediately that you were passionate about from a tiny wee girl, and now you're in a job that you weren't passionate about. And I think there might be a lot of people who are in the same situation now, particularly after the pandemic, reflecting on a year of being locked down. Was it the case that you were in a job just thinking, this isn't me?
Absolutely. And we got to think that what we do for a living, I mean, our jobs basically take at least 30% of our time. It's 8 hours a day, so at least 30% of our time, if not more, right? This is the minimum. And so you need to think, do I want to spend 30%, which is a third? And another third I'm sleeping. More than another third I'm sleeping. So what is left really to enjoy if I am not enjoying that 30%? Right? So I got in that idea. I was like 21, 22, finished engineering, and I have superb marks. So I really got out with a distinction. So it was very kind of straightforward for me to find a position. And I interviewed once with Daimler. It's not that I sent 10 CVs. I mean, I sent one. And they hire me, right? That was my goal. And then I got in, I was like, oh my God, this is pretty boring. In fact, what do I do here, right? And so it was a little bit, and again, it was my parents. In that case, it was more my mom telling me, look, if you don't like it, you are very young, just quit. Go back to university, study something else, and see if there is something else that you like, right? And that's what I did. I quit after a year. And probably the best decision I've ever done. And hey, yeah, I went back to uni.
You went back to university. Was it the confines, the constrictions, the rules of a big company, the kind of you can't go outside this boundary, you have to do this process? Was that part of the challenge?
Yeah, I think there are different things, and hey, it can really work for some people.
For some people, yeah.
But I am someone who likes looks at problems as opportunities to improve, to change things, and so in big corporates, you have like 5 lines of hierarchy that you need to go through to make a change.
Yes.
And those things are very draining because whenever you want to do new things, it's just impossible, right?
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things. Second, and I'm going to be very clear on this, I was 21, 22. I'm an engineer. I'm sitting in the assembly line of the cars, telling those guys who are like 40, 45, telling them how to basically, so taking supervision in terms of, because I was doing quality management. So we were working a lot with suppliers and so on. And if something wasn't working, it could be that the material was not good. It could be that the person sitting there wasn't doing the right job. So you need to see, also record with a camera. And obviously those guys were like, who are you?
Yeah.
Who is this baby coming here, a woman, 20 years old? Like, you know what I mean? It was pretty tough in that way. I've been doing this job for 20 years. You are not going to tell me now, how do I do this work, right? Yeah. So that's really, so I think definitely was a good decision.
So back to school you went, and to study technology, digital transformation, that kind of world. Was that what inspired you?
That's how I got, in fact, where I am right now, working with the startups and in venture, right? But I went back and I started a PhD. I did a master's in engineering first, but with the goal of doing a PhD. To do a PhD, you need to do a master's in engineering. And the PhD was around technology transfer. So at the time, they were setting up the first technology transfer offices in Spain at universities. But they were universities like Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, who were doing this for years, right? And so the professor I started working with in Spain, he told me, hey, we are really new on this, but there are some people who are really experts. Just go there, figure it out. How do we need to do our job here? And so that's what I did. I just went to that place called Silicon Valley in 2005, right? Trying to figure out how the universities were doing that, and just knocking doors. And I bumped into this guy who was running one of the entrepreneurship centers at UC Berkeley. Yeah. And so I worked with them for 2.5 years. So everything started with a conversation. He got really engaged on what I was telling him I wanted to study. And he said, it will be great if we write some papers. So we ended up, so he basically hired me as a visiting researcher at UC Berkeley, moved to California, and spent there 2.5 years, 3 years, finishing my PhD. And it was fantastic. So you get this back, right? Which is like the entrepreneurial investor type of mentality, which is fantastic, fast moving environment. So I loved it.
So you knew you weren't in the right place where you were. So you up sticks, you go to Berkeley, as you do, and you land. You land in there. That takes a sense of curiosity, of courage, of adventure.
I tell you something about that, Richard. In fact, when I started working with him, so he said, this is really great, we should write something. But before, he basically hired me as a visiting researcher. And so I spent the first year going back and forth to Spain. Yeah. Because when you don't have a visa, you are an immigrant. You leave and enter the country every 3 months. And the guy asked me sometime, so is there anything in your family that you gotta be traveling there so often? You know what I mean? Is there anything that I'm like, well, I don't have a visa, I'm a tourist here. You know, there were all these stamps at the entrance of the basically at the borders, at the border control. And so he said, oh, wow, if that's a problem, then we can hire you here. So I didn't even ask for it. It was more of a conversation that we had certain day, which was very funny.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that then led you on to like teaching entrepreneurship, which is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, I mean, I've worked in technology for 25, 26 years, but I've never really heard of people teaching and lecturing entrepreneurship. Is it something you can teach or something you're born with?
That's very interesting. Very good question. And it's a question that a lot of people ask me about. So I was teaching entrepreneurship at Imperial College. I was teaching MBAs. Today, in fact, I do teach one subject at UCL, and that's entrepreneurial finance. And I teach in the master's in entrepreneurship or in engineering with finance. So I teach the same course. I'm going to give you an example. When you are in secondary school and you take a lecture on maths or physics, the teacher is providing you some skills, but it's not expecting you necessarily to become a mathematician. Or a physician. So when you teach at the university, there are two different ways to look at it, right? There is the way that this is enforced, as it was in the secondary school. You did maths because you gotta do it. I mean, you choose a little bit. Obviously, it's not arts. It's not when you do your 13, 14 years old, you start choosing there. But it is not necessarily because you are going to become that. So it's something a little bit enforced on that. Right? Or there are things like the Masters in Entrepreneurship right now where people pay to do this. So they come already with an entrepreneurial mindset. My job, easy. They are already entrepreneurial, and I give them the skills, the frameworks, and I always say this to reduce risk. To speed up the go-to-market, to give a couple of steps that they need to follow. I can't make sure they are going to be successful, but definitely I can reduce the risk and speed up this process a little bit. So that's how I see it.
You can stack the odds in their favor of doing well. And it strikes me that, maybe 20, 25 years ago, these sort of courses, weren't available, weren't around. But for people out there who are fascinated by entrepreneurship, running their own business, would you recommend that as a really good option to get started?
Usually, if you are already running your business, you probably don't need the course.
I
always say that, right? I think the course is more for people. When I teach engineering with finance, for example, to the guys on engineering with finance, and I give them this subject, this lecture, they have no idea what venture capital is. Those engineers, they build something, they come to me and they're like, hey, I built this. What do I do? You know what I mean? All the way around. They've built something already. They're like, hey, I want to put it out there, but what do I need to do? So do I do marketing? Do I put the link? You know what I mean?
It gives you a good framework, though, doesn't it? It gives you a good framework to follow and learn about unnatural skills, I guess.
Correct.
I'd like to turn now. We'll come back to the world of Microsoft Ventures and Notion and so on in a minute. But you told me a story when we spoke about running, and you decided to go to the gym and go on a running machine. I think I'm right in thinking. Pick up the story from there.
Yeah. So it's so the same mentality that I always had on business, I would say, probably in my personal life, I do this all the time. I mean, even today, I do some things that I think, in fact, my husband is an angel, because really I am. This is what I'm going to do at this time, and this is what I'm going to do at this time. Right? I don't care what other people do. So I was basically when I was doing my PhD still. So I started to go to the gym, and as anybody does, and so on. But I never run. I was doing some classes, and you go this aerobics, doing a little bit of spinning here. I always felt, even when I was a child and I was dancing, when I was running at the school, I was the faster runner at the school. I was also the best football player. So I always had very good skills for sports. So I was going to the gym as anybody does. And one day I went there and I'm like, you know what? I feel like running. All these people running here. And so I ran and I called my husband, who was doing at the time a couple of marathons himself and so on. I don't even know what time he was doing. But I called him and I said, hey, I ran today. And at the time, he was my boyfriend. And I said, hey, I go today. And he's like, I ran today. And he said, really? How much do you run? How long? And I'm like, so I think I ran like 12 kilometers, 12K, which is around 7.2 miles for those who think in miles. And he's like, oh, great. That's really good for the first run. So how long did it take? I'm like, just around 55 minutes. He was like, what? No, I think you are grown. He told me, you are grown. I think you probably made a mistake looking at the numbers in a certain way. You probably made a mistake. And then I started probably questioning myself. I was like, yeah, maybe. And he said, which shoes did you run with? Because you don't even have running shoes. And I had been running with those Puma shoes, which were for walking in the street. My calves were like very tight. And I said, well, I used the Pumas because I didn't have running shoes. And he said, and I came here with the spinning shoes. But the reason I ran, in fact, one of the reasons was because the class was like super full. And I was like, okay, I'll just run.
Yeah.
So I only had those shoes or the spinning shoes, which obviously there was not an option. So that was the first time I ran, I think. And then obviously I took it from there, and I started running even a little bit farther and faster, for sure. Yeah.
But you discovered something. You discovered something in the, almost by mistake. You discovered another skill, another energy. I mean, it's hardly surprising if you trained as a classical dancer that you would have that natural energy, that natural physicality, I think, required to become an athlete. But again, not happy with just running a ridiculously fast 12K straight out the gate. You then decided to take your running skills to run a half marathon. Am I right in thinking? The human race, was that in Barcelona?
The first time I went for a race, I don't need to prove anything. So I just was doing it because I liked it, but I was pretty good. And there was this human race, which was a 10K. So I don't know if you guys remember, but there was this Nike was putting together like races around the world where they wanted to put the humanity running for a day. So a day they wanted to have 3 or 4 races in the different cities. So in Barcelona, I think there were like 3 or 4 of them. And so I was there, and one of my girlfriends there said, hey, let's just go run. Then we go for some tapas, as you do. So totally unprepared, we go. And it was next to the Barceloneta, for those who know Barcelona pretty well.
Love it,
and so I get there, and one of my girlfriends said, like, hey, just so you know, it's like almost 40 degrees. It was at midday. It was almost 40 degrees. It's super hot. I've been sick last week. So you ladies go, and I will see if I can finish, because I was sick last week and I don't know. And I said, well, okay, I will just go to each of us, do whatever we need to do, and then we meet at the end. So I start running. And when I get in towards the end, people are like clapping, and one lady say, come on, go. You are the first woman. I'm like, what?
Wow.
I'm the first woman? What do you mean? What does that mean even, right?
Yeah.
So I finished, right? And I was the first woman. And so they come there with water and so on. It was very hot. And so the guys from Nike who were sponsoring, and they give me a t-shirt so I can go to the podium. And the lady was like, it was a pretty good time for the heat and so on. People were really exhausted. So what was your time before in 10K? I'm like, I don't know. I've never done a 10K before. And the lady was like, what do you mean? I'm like, no, I've never done a 10K before, and I don't even have a watch. So when I run outside, I don't track my run. She was like, this is amazing. So Nike called me the following week. They were like, hey, we want you to be a Nike ambassador, because it is so inspiring for other people that you just run because you like it, inspires you, basically makes you think, feel good. And you became so good out of that, right? And so they were sending me clothes, sending me to some races. So I had a big community in Facebook, early days of those trackers, on the shoe that we were putting a little thing.
You put it in the sole, didn't you? And it would tell you how far you'd run.
Exactly. That's right. Today, just with our watch, we have that, right? In fact, I'm very angry right now because now I do have a Garmin and it broke last week. And the guys told me they are sending it in June. I'm like, this is an eternity for a runner.
It's forever. Fantastic. I mean, what a story, and to discover that skill and then to prove it. And I suspect that when you find a passion, that almost becomes an obsession of yours. You're curious enough to dive into it. What are the dynamics of it? How can I go faster? What analysis can I do of my breathing and of my speed? Am I right? Am I on the right?
Oh my God, yeah. You got it totally. I'm watching videos. Usain Bolt, how does he run? Like very close to the ground. Look at this. You watch a little bit. And I've done a couple of other races afterwards. But I think with Anna, you mentioned that there is always that person who triggers or that identifies a little bit your skill and your talent, right? And I always run by myself. And if you look a little bit at my background and coming from this independent background a little bit, so I danced, which is a very independent thing to do. I did a PhD, which is a 5 years work. Just by yourself, running is just by yourself. I don't need anybody else. I'm not even in Strava. I don't share anything with anybody because I really don't need to. It's just me, and you do your thing, I do my thing, right? And so when I was working for Imperial College, when I came to London and I started teaching entrepreneurship there, I was running in the Hyde Park, and there was this professor who was also going to run every day at the same time. So we were bumping into each other, and he was pretty fast too. So we were running together, but he was training for marathons. So he had basically a schedule to follow, and I was like, okay, follow it with you, whatever. And so he was like, you are really good. You are following my schedule. You can do the marathon. You really can do it. And I'm like, why do I need to do a race, right? This is so much fun, just as it is. And so he really convinced me. He said, look, I'm going to Belgium to do this marathon, and they have also half marathon. You can start from a half marathon. But come on, come with me. We do that. And I'm like, okay, let's just do this. I went to Belgium. It was raining cats and dogs. I was like, who told me to come here? Like, this is not what I wanted to do. But hey, we're here right now. I'm in Belgium. Hey, I got to do it now, right? So just did the half marathon and ended up the second under the podium. He was amazed. He was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And then I think a year and a half after or so went to my parents' place in Spain. Haven't done no races whatsoever in between, just training, and went to Spain to see my parents. And the guy who, in fact, last year was one of the best marathon, 50 plus years old marathon runners. He's from my hometown in Spain. So the biggest marathon in Spain happens in my hometown because everyone he has his name, and he has been a marathon in the Olympics 5-6 times, and he's right now he goes to the Olympics over 50 years old, and still you see him running all over the place. So I went there, and my mom said, hey, you know that on Sunday is a marathon here happening. I'm like, okay, so when is the sign up finishing? And she went to the newspaper, the paper. When we look at the papers, they look at the papers. And she said, I think it finishes the subscription. I mean, you can sign up until 8 p.m. today. So we went 15 to 8, sign up. Next day I was there 7:30 in the morning, and I ran, and I was, and that one I was second, I think, just a little bit under 1 hour and a half, which was like, believe it. Yes.
Just extraordinary. We must talk technology and SaaS. And I'm guessing when you were back at Berkeley, you must have been witness to some incredible startups and stories. And I know that when you were at the Microsoft Ventures, you were very closely involved in the Onfido startup, obviously Unbabel before Notion, and I'm assuming now with Notion. Some incredible stories. What is it about these businesses? What is it about these founders that separates them from the rest?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it is not easy to identify, because if it will be easy to identify, I tell you, I wouldn't be here right
Yeah.
now. Probably, I
We
will
need to
have
know you.
already invested in a company, and I will be,
Yes.
I, I don't know, maybe doing other things, or maybe doing this because I absolutely love it. To be
Yeah.
honest, I don't really know, but. I do think that those founders, sometimes we talk about this, a little bit of an X factor, that drive
Mhm.
that makes them feel they can really build a world changing
Yeah.
technology, product, opportunity. Like, they want to tackle that, right? And
Yeah.
they have a big vision in that, and they're willing to move walls to make that work.
Yeah.
And a 500 million exit, 1 billion exit is
Yeah.
just starting point. This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
where we want to start, and then we follow that. And I think today there are so many unicorns in Europe. There are probably over 30 of them, or around 30 of them in Europe, and that is inspiring many founders. And we see people with huge drive, right? And I always talk a little bit about this, because when I have the feeling that some cultures, when they haven't seen that fast growth and big companies,
Mm.
uh, they still don't think they can make that work. And so I always say, when I give talks sometimes, hey, I can build a company, I can raise what, uh 30 million, and I
Mhm.
will be the queen of San Sebastian.
Yeah.
There are not that many people in San Sebastian who has, in Spain, that have raised 30 million. I'm like the queen in San Sebastian.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah,
what?
what
Yeah.
is what? But
Yeah.
what, right? What
Yeah.
do I do with that? What is the impact that I'm having with that? How many jobs
Yeah.
am I creating with that,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
So is this a product that is really embedded in every company? Is this a product that I sit in the bus, and the person next to me is basically using it,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Yeah, I
that
always
is
have a definition of is it an app or a product that will be on the home screen of someone's phone, not the
correct.
swipey or crossy, not page 3 or page 4. Is it something that'll be on the home screen? And I think
Correct.
your friend of mine, Chris Totman, sums it up beautifully when he says, "Can you get ordinary people to do unusual things?"
Exactly.
As a
Exactly.
definition, for anyone out there thinking about building a product, think about how you can get ordinary people to do unusual things, and you'd be on a very, very good place. Is it resonates with you?
For sure, absolutely. It is that also idea of having drive, and I think that comes when we started the conversation. A lot comes from, where are you coming from? What have
Yeah,
you seen?
yeah,
uh, because it is an attitude type
yeah,
of thing. I mean, you can know a lot about the subject, but if you don't have the attitude,
yeah,
a growth mindset that I usually talk a lot with my founders, when I put money in, we gotta get in this growth mindset,
yeah,
um, and that is a priority, and we should be obsessed. And in fact, I am very impatient,
yeah,
very impatient,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah,
Unfortunately for the people around me.
yeah.
And so I push a lot for that, right?
Yeah, and that comes across in everything that you do. I think so much of this is in your background. I think a lot of it can be learned, a lot of it can be taught. Both Gary and Anna talk. I mean, Anna talked about the hacker's guide to fast. How to live in the fast lane, because there are rules. And we talked about the degree course you teach in entrepreneurship, where you can learn the framework and the structure. But you've got to find that something inside you, haven't you? You've got to. We talked last week with Gary about Jonathan Livingston Seagull. You can if you think you can, and picturing, what growth looks like, what amazing looks like. I'm sure
Hmm.
that's something you look for in these founders. Would I be right?
For sure, for sure. And you try to ask questions, and to get to that point with them, right? But obviously, you can't ask the questions directly, because everyone can fake a response. So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
gotta
yeah,
grasp it in the way they talk, in the way they behave, in their analytical, critical mindset, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
spending time with them. I think you mentioned Chris, and I think he's absolutely fantastic spending time with the founders and building that connection and feeling that connection. And if you don't feel you are both the investor and the founder willing to get in the same adventure and at the same speed, then probably we shouldn't do this, because life is too short.
Yeah.
Right?
So true. The terms that have come out in the time we spent together, and I'm conscious we're running out of time, is independence, rebel spirit, follow your passion, have a dream big. These are all phrases that have come across in the time we've spoken. What else would you add to that? What would you say to your 18-year-old self, knowing what you know now, and to other younger people who maybe aspire to do something incredible with their life?
Yeah, I think maybe I had some time in between, probably 18 to 23, 24, where I don't think I cultivated enough or took advantage enough of things that I could learn much more from people that I could get closer to. I do think what I will have done much earlier and better is to get closer to people who can be mentors, and they don't need to be an official mentor, but the fact that you might be working with them in certain projects, listen to people who are much more experienced. I think that is something that I regret not having done more, because it is an opportunity for everyone, right? And you just need to send a couple of love emails, talk in a because basically people like to hear that they are amazing, and there are so many entrepreneurs specifically who are incredible. And maybe they are not willing to do unofficial mentoring, but they are willing to give you a project, so you work on that and you learn and you get feedback, and at the same time both of you are getting something from each other. And I think I got that when I met this professor at UC Berkeley, where he was like, hey, and I understood what is working with somebody who knows what they are doing. They have the connections and can move. And he is still, I mean, I'm writing a chapter in a book that he is in fact publishing in the next couple of months, right? So he's inviting me to do that. I'm really in touch with him, and definitely has a speed up. I would advise that.
It's what Chris Paul and I, who've worked together for 25, 26 years, have sort of kind of dedicating the rest of our careers to, is mentorship. Is, the story of the guy that falls in a hole, and the doctor walks past and chucks him a prescription, and the priest walks past and throws down a prayer, and his best mate jumps in the hole with him, and our guy says, what are you doing? Now we're both in the hole, and the best mate friend says, yeah, I've been in this hole before and I know the way out. It's what Accelerate does, is mentorship. It's being mentors to founders who maybe don't know where to turn, who feel they don't want to turn to their investors because they think their investors are going to feel, worse about them, and they don't really want to turn to their senior team. There's something incredibly rewarding about mentorship and watching 100%. People start winning. Is that something you share?
100%. And hey, I teach at the university. I teach on Fridays. They are 10 Fridays a year. 5 of them I teach 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon, 5, which is like I see 250 students in the same day. And I love it. It's like I'm exhausted afterwards, right? And I do this. I don't do this for money.
No.
It's just the impact that I can have on people who are in the last year of their engineering degree or doing their masters, because I am already working. And obviously, as I have a PhD, I think it gives you a little bit of a structured mindset in the way you communicate, so which is important, because many people are very good in their jobs, but they are not able to structure that information in such a way that a student will capture it and will be able to use it, which is very important in a lecturer, I think, right? So the impact that I can have, and I have students coming to me after several years, and basically this year I put a small ticket in two of the companies of students of mine from 3 and 10 years ago. One student who is in this his second company, right? So those sort of things are very, very rewarding, and it's really amazing.
So reach out to mentors if you're younger and you're not sure where to go. You know, find people who've been there before. And if you are somebody who is successful, you know, pay it forward a little bit by picking up young people and telling them that they're great. You know, and the commonality in this series of in every interview I've done, someone has approached the person I've interviewed and told them that they were great. The difference is that you guys stood up and went to find that passion and find that energy and find that thing that you were good at. And that's amazing. We've run out of time, and I'm gutted because I have so enjoyed talking to you the 2 times we've done it. Itxaso, you are an extraordinary human being, and this chat has been so engaging, and I know so many people are going to just love listening to you and listening to your story. It's an incredible story, and I know you're not even a third of the way through it yet, so we'll catch up in time to come. But thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I mean, it's difficult to go after Anna and Gary, who I know Gary very well, and Anna, I feel like I know her after listening to the video and to the chat with you. But definitely a pleasure talking to you, Richard, and please stay in touch.
I think the series is going to, I mean, I don't think I think you absolutely match them both. I think it's the series and the combination of these chats, which has been amazing. But thank you so much, Itxaso. Thank you for your insight, for your story. Really touched my heart. And we'll catch up really soon. Thank you again.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.